Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jim Worsdale, and joining me is my partner in crime, Brandon Wooden.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to 2026, the driver training town hall session. This is our first of the year. Um, Hello to everybody. You can unmic and just say hello as we're getting started.
Great to see everybody here coming into a 2026 kind of cold, I think. I'm in Neenah, Wisconsin at our corporate office this week, and it's supposed to drop down to, I want to say, 25 below zero for the high, and Midwest is going to get some storms, so 2026 is coming on with a vengeance, right?
Absolutely. It looked like Warren was going to say something. Warren, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. I had to click the mic on so I could hear you.
Okay, no worries. No worries.
Good to see you here.
But hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you. Marquis? Oh, just waving hello. Okay, gotcha. Okay, we appreciate it. So, all right, gang. Well, listen, we're so excited, and this is our second year doing this. We started this in April of 2025. Very excited to be sharing some knowledge, sharing some expertise, talking through some pretty neat topics when we talk through a lot of this stuff. Today is one that I really wrap my hands around. Brandon, you and I have a lot of conversations about this EQ IQ thing where developing emotional intelligence, what it's all about, having the communication. How do you use that emotional intelligence in our day-to-day? A lot of the individuals on these calls here are running fleets. So how does that impact not just yourself and your team, but how does it impact the drivers that are out there driving, doing the job every single day, and where we can use that in our fleets? So I really excited about this topic to start the year. It's always a good one. But before we get started, I'd like you to introduce you to the group. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself since you're our subject matter expert.
Oh, phooey. Well, I'm Brandon Wooden. I've been in the industry for pushing 35 years now. So 35 years. As a driver trainer, a CDL examiner, also a subject matter expert in entry-level driver training. And then more recently, I guess, in my career, it's been focused on how do we affect behaviors in the industry? How do we say, okay, we've got a driver that's learning all the things, IQ. How do we start to build those behaviors around an EQ, emotional intelligence, that we're looking for whenever somebody is behind the wheel? Basically, here's why. And we'll get to this in more detail, Jim. I'm excited as you are about this topic because the more we do that, the better we can see those IQ things, the what we want drivers to know, start to become the behaviors and then move into practice. It takes both. You can know a lot of things, but then if you don't know how you're truly existing and managing those kind of things, it becomes difficult to see it to fruition. So anyway, I appreciate you. You're first on that screen, though. This is you're our host here, so I'm going to chuck it back to you, Jim Worsdale, everybody.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So Brandon and I have both been with JJ Keller for a little bit over 6 years. We are the architects of the driver training program here and the Safe and Smart program. Prior to that, I worked in the LTL market in operations. I worked actually as a safety and compliance and transportation director. Worked in the supply chain. So I've done a little bit of everything, dipped my toe in the pool and a bunch of different things, and just glad to be here to be able to share our knowledge and communicate what we know and kind of how we can connect the dots for you all.
So one thing, before we get into this, is again just housekeeping. We want this to be open. We want you guys to be able to unmute your mics if you have a specific question, or even we may ask you a question. How are you applying this habit or this coaching in what you're doing? So feel free, please raise your hand if you want to do something like that and you want to chime in. That is what we are here for. Town halls are supposed to be very open. Very much just listening to what you have to say and any questions you might have.
Nope. To piggyback on Brandon's point, we want to hear from you all. So this is our first town hall of the year. We want to do emotional intelligence Brandon and I nerd about stuff like this. We talk about this stuff all the time when we have conversations about this. But we want to know what interests you all. We have some opportunities to do some different things, do some different there's a myriad of topics that we can cover when we work through this. So as you can see, some of the topics we've got listed here, we're going to have some trainer and driver led town halls, some conversations around that, bringing some trainers that are out on the forefront in the field, working through that, talking through a trainer's toolbox. What does a trainer's toolbox look like? What sort of information do they bring every single week? Are they learning from the other trainers that they're working with? How does that work? So there's some opportunities for us. There are some, we do have the opportunity to bring your ideas to the forefront. So please reach out to us. The three of us are on here, and then our maestro behind the scenes, Janice Bowers, she, we couldn't do this without her. So she's also available as well. So if you all want to, there she is.
I was going to say, we might need to give her an applause to see her on the screen. She'd be at least a welcome addition to that, I would think, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
First to stay behind the scenes. Never have really understood that, Janice. Jim, we also have this format. It was new to JJ Keller pretty much last year, right? If anyone has been on any webinars that JJ Keller has put together, any kind of informational webinars, this was absolutely intended to be different from that. We don't want to teach at you through these. Instead, we want to hear from you. We want to have that open communication so that our company can share a little bit about what we know and also, point you in some directions to help you improve your business. It's a goal of JJ Keller to help other people practice safe driving habits, practice safety in their companies, and also also be stewards out there. So that's why we love that this is continuing into 2026. We love that we have an audience here that wants to do the same kind of thing. So please let us hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, but before we jump into this, Brandon, you and I talk a lot about these conversations, the IQ versus EQ. What is EQ? What is emotional intelligence for the people that don't understand? You and I have read books. We've talked through some of this stuff. You're going to talk a little bit about Goleman's model here in a little bit. Talk to the group. Tell them a little bit about what EQ actually is, and how we can use it in operating our fleets.
Well, I think that the best way to start talking about emotional intelligence or EQ is to actually talk a little bit about IQ. And when we look at somebody with a great deal of IQ, intelligence quotient, it means that they have a lot of things that are in their head. They have precise knowledge. This can be IQ about even a particular subject, or if you've been a driver in the industry for a long time, you know how things work. You know what it's going to be when you go into to your dispatcher. You've learned things about what you do in your job that's very important to have. Having emotional intelligence is a little bit more, how do we function when things get maybe a little bit, I'm going to say just a little weird, how do we react whenever other people are driving a certain way? And a good example I'm going to give you is up here, Jim, you and I travel quite a bit for work. We're always in a different city or we're somewhere in the country that's unfamiliar. And it's really interesting how you can kind of see what the EQ of other drivers are out there. And so I constantly have to check myself. If I'm looking at other drivers and I'm trying to say, you should be driving this way, or you shouldn't be doing that, am I too focused on what they should be doing or how they should be acting? Or am I a little bit, or should I go a little bit more to, am I just witnessing that because I'm getting in the mix with them? I'm not really saying that I'm practicing my emotional intelligence behind the wheel and saying, it's better if I don't really affect somebody else, or I don't move into their space, or they don't have to really know that I'm there because I'm watching out for them. If I can check my attitude maybe it's a little bit of self-awareness and attitude, and say that if I'm checking that back here and we are now in a space where we can exist comfortably together, now I can say that I don't need to have a lot of IQ of the what to do there. I just know that this is going to be something that's going to motivate those things that I know to do. I know to turn on my turn signal. I know, how to merge, how to exit, how to come to a stop, how to leave space, and those kind of things. But when Goleman starts talking about how EQ is applied, he says that this is almost more important than intelligence, than IQ, is how we exist every day in the framework of our works and our work, our lives, our relationships. How are we regulating ourselves? How are we motivated to perform a certain thing? Do we get just upset and not really have a place to displace that when it's appropriate or not appropriate? I'm sure that we've all encountered somebody that we look at and go, wonder what's going to happen now. Maybe there's somebody that says, hey, I have no filter, and then it's not, something that's appropriate because they can't self-regulate, right? We could say that social skills are learned. Social skills, any one of these things in Goleman's model for emotional intelligence, these are all things that can be learned, but they aren't learned in the same way that we learn things for our IQ. We're not learning the stuff. We're learning the how and the why and more of the soft skills that it takes to be able to exist in a community with others. And I'll tell you what, Jim, I see it all the time. If we go out here and suddenly the traffic is much more than I've ever experienced before, or other people's driving behaviors are a certain way, I have to really kind of check myself sometimes. Am I existing the way that I should be driving based on how I'm affecting other people and what they're trying to get done? So when we look at knowing what to do, but then being able to have that emotional intelligence to apply it in ways that we harmonize with those around us, it becomes a lot different whenever we're driving in that situation. It's almost, you can recall it better even. Am I interfering with somebody else? Are they, are they in trouble because of what I'm doing? Am I distracted right now? And how would that play out if somebody else is distracted? Do we clash then? And it almost brings me back into my space to say, I need to be okay here. I need to be able to know that what I'm doing is not going to harm someone else, is going to play nice in the sandbox a little bit, right?
Yes, sir. So I got a question for you. You run a fleet, you run, a training team, an operations team. How do you take the self-awareness, the self-regulation, how do you take that, when you're removing some of the feelings out, how do you take that and implement that when you're leading your team? How does that work when you're in the moment? There's a lot of stressors, a lot of things coming at you. How do you do that in your role, and how does that impact?
I think that, and it's not going to seem very intuitive, but you always have to be looking for a better question. Am I asking the right questions in order for me to get the right answers as a manager, as a leader, even as a person in my community? What are the questions that I'm asking right now? Am I asking a question like, what are you doing? Instead of, how are we getting to this thing together? Am I asking the right questions that really get us to where we can work together, more than asking questions about the what? Again, it's that IQ, EQ. The questions that you ask sometimes as a manager, as a leader, as a coach, are going to be, what are these things that we're supposed to be doing, instead of how do we get there together, or what does this mean to you, or why are we thinking this way? How do you think this could improve the situation? And then there's a lot of being able to give that back to the person that you're leading or coaching or working with, to say, we need to come at this, not me coming at you, but we need to come at this with us working together in order to get to the solution. So not quite intuitive so much in the field of transportation, the rough and tumble world of the transportation industry or anything, where we tend to be a little bit more get it done, get it done, get it done, move it, move it, move it, move it, move it, move it. Not a lot of time to think, hey, how are we all doing here? But if you don't take a step around every once in a while and say, are we all okay? then sometimes you're driving yourself right through that wall of I'm not okay, but I'm still going to push. I'm still going to keep motivating forward. And we see that sometimes in accidents and incidents where we're just driving ahead without taking that time to say, let's check ourselves real quick. How are we doing here? Is everybody got what they need? Is everybody positioned well enough? How do you feel about going out when it's, when the weather is bad? I'd like to know. I'd like to know before I say you can do it. Everybody out there, everybody else is out there driving. Why aren't you out there driving if everybody else is? To hear somebody say, yeah, I'm just not as comfortable at it. And I would take that as a sign that somebody has a greater deal of emotional intelligence. They know how to self-regulate. They know when things start to make them be uncomfortable. Jim, you and I have talked about the cliff edge before. A lot of emotional intelligence in driving. And the way I say it is this way. Anybody on this call, I mean, some of you might not be. Some of you might be able to just walk right out over to the edge of a cliff and not feel anything. For most of us, as we start to walk towards that cliff edge, and anxiety happens, we start to get a little bit like we're going to pitch over, or we get a little bit like unsettled in our footing as we move closer to the edge of a cliff, a bluff, a tall building, or something like that. So knowing where that cliff edge moment is in here can definitely help you self-regulate and stay behind the cliff edge. If you know where that is, if you know when things start to make you feel a little bit like you're approaching that cliff edge, the rest of it's easy. Stay behind the cliff edge. If you're behind the cliff edge, you're now in a more comfortable position to be able to do your job effectively, get it done, and also get it done on time. Because a lot of times when we're pushing, it drives us to accidents. It drives us to, we run off and we forget our keys, or we run off and I forgot our paperwork or something like this as we're driving this forward. So I would say that's
he asked for Thursday and Friday.
I think we had somebody open their mic. Love to hear from you. How do you, if you exercise these kind of practices as you're working with drivers, as you're even working with your kids as they're learning how to drive? I think it's an important thing to say to any kid that, hey, listen, I can teach you how to drive this vehicle right now, but what I can't really teach you, you're going to have to start to develop this experience of knowing where those points are, knowing where those times when you shouldn't move past your comfort zone. And for kids, that can be real tough, can't it?
No, without a doubt. The stressors that come from day to day from running fleets, I think there's a lot of undue stress underneath the surface working through things. And I know my team likes to give me a hard time because my favorite phrase is control the controllables. So,
control the controllables.
So what I try to do with that statement is to remove stressors from people. When you're going through your day, you might have 10 or 12 stressors during your day. And when those accidents and injuries occur, somebody's moving a little too fast or going, 2 steps ahead, and their mind's thinking about something completely different, and they get an injury or they get into an accident, a close quarter maneuvering accident, backing into an awning, hitting a post, those sort of things when they're moving too fast. That's the kind of things that happen on a regular basis if you don't slow down your processes. And I think EQ is a big part of it. So being able to get in front of your team and being able to remove those challenges from them, show empathy as a leader is a big part of it. And being able to say, hey, I understand what you're going through. You can't control if that truck's going to break down. You can't control if traffic is going to be in the way. You can't control the weather. All of those things you can't control. Understand that. Remove all of that stuff and just go out there and do your best job. Do the best work you can do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jim. Sometimes with the controllables, I've said this before too, you cannot control your reaction to something. If something breaks or you're probably going to have a reaction, no matter if it's I'm angry at this thing, or I'm upset about this, or you really made me mad, or this is fantastic, I'm overjoyed with something. That initial reaction you can't really control, but here's what you can control. you can control your response. You take a moment and you say, what is the appropriate response in this situation? What is the response that gets us moving toward a more beneficial answer?
So I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, I'm going to ask the group, is there any examples that you all can give us? Things that ways you've used EQ in your fleet? You know, the emotional intelligence has become a big deal, you know, in this new world. How do you all use it in your fleet? And or is this the first time you're hearing about it? You know, is this something that's new? Do you have questions around it? We'd love to hear from you all.
The thing I usually, open your mics, and what I'll say is that the thing I usually say is, oh, that's a bunch of fluffy kind of stuff, until people start to really get in there and say, oh my goodness, this is where people are challenged more. They're not challenged in what they know. They're challenged in how they move it into practice. You might not even call it emotional intelligence. You might just say that this is the time when we open it up for Q&A, and then you're telling your safety leaders to say, you need to shut up and listen now, so that you get a little bit more back about how the drivers feel about an initiative or something. You don't have to call it emotional intelligence to practice it, right?
Nope, not at all. So how do you implement it at work, Brandon, with your team, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, I would say that with my team, especially when I'm talking about trainers and I'm talking about safety training and that kind of thing, I always look for a different question. I look for a more beautiful question. Maybe I can ask a question that just gives me a what answer. And instead of stopping there and saying, that's what it is, move a little deeper. Now it's getting into the why, it's getting into the how, instead of just stopping at the what. And the more we get people on my team to think that way, the better we start to see that they can then function when they go out and they can start to ask those better, more beautiful questions. And it leads to even more ownership and accountability of the situation. Just being able to say, are we asking every question that we should? And are we asking the best, most beautiful questions that we should?
Makes sense. Janice.
Janice!
Hi, I'm emerging from behind the scenes. Because I was on a call recently and I heard this, and like, as you guys are talking about this, I'm making the connection here. So, and hopefully this will inspire other people to open up their mics. But I heard that they were using like almost like a pre-trip inspection to like check the mental state, like the mental awareness, almost like a pre-trip inspection before. And like, it just kind of like ties into what we're talking about of having like the driver readiness, preparing yourself for that chaos that can happen on the road. And, if you start with that mindset. So I thought that was just, I had never heard that before, and it seems like it ties in here. So that's why I emerged.
It's a beautiful way of thinking about it, is that a lot of times, and we see this in driver training a lot of times, people just show up and then they're there. And then they tend to kind of be in the flotsam and jetsam. They're kind of scrambling to get purchased again. They're struggling to swim and everything. And the answer might have been, were you prepared to do this even before you got here? Jim, we trained a lot of drivers that were going to do package delivery, right? And they knew they were coming there to drive a truck. They had the entire list of the appropriate clothes to wear, and they show up in flip-flops and flip-flops and shorts and say, I'm here. What do I do next? And I know that's more of the what, Janice, but if you really know what you're going to do next, you start to see that preparation come into play. And that can be physical preparation that says, I know what I'm needing to do next, and I am now prepared for it. Some people do look at emotional intelligence as the way I'm dressed, the way that I am about to perform. What kind of image am I going to present here? How am I going to be received, and how are we going to be able to work together? All of those more beautiful questions about preparedness can definitely get you in the mindset to do it. Driving, I would say it's as much as sometimes looking out the window, or maybe I'm in the parking lot and I'm looking at how fast cars are going out on the interstate. Hey, they're moving a little bit slow out there. Immediately, I'm starting to think that I'm going to need more time right now so that I don't have to push. If I know I'm running late, then I feed off that running late, then every single slowdown tends to impact even more and more and more. Why? Because I was running late, and that's how I went into the situation, having to move forward safely.
Yeah, and that was kind of the messaging I was getting, of like the purpose behind that so-called pre-trip inspection. But yeah, I just thought I would chime in. So
I love it. We often say that the pre-trip inspection is where you shake hands with the truck, or when you do the
yeah,
check of your business before you step through the door. And if you had a brick and mortar shop, you probably walk up to it and, are the windows broken out of this thing? Did somebody break in? Is the door jimmied open? Did it flood last night or anything like that? Why wouldn't we do that in the place that we're going to do business today, which is actually the vehicle inspection on the truck we're about to drive? Aren't very many business owners that would walk into their business and go, "Bah, we're just going to start doing business right now. It doesn't matter if the windows are there or not, or if the floor's flooded or anything like this." They do that check that things are okay, the situation is okay to conduct business, and I'm in a mental state to conduct the business of the day. If you aren't, step back, ask another question. What can I do right now to become even more prepared for what I'm about to do? Should I make a phone call and say, "Hey, I'm running a little late and traffic is really heavy. I just wanted to give you a heads up that I may be running about 5-10 minutes late." Now, if you do that, what's the expectation you have back again? Because that's going to fuel the next thing. And then they yelled at me because I just tried to call and I just tried to tell them I was running late. And all they said is, "You'd better get here," and blah, 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 blah. Are you prepared even to have those hits that you're going to take to say, "I understand your concern. I understand, but we're going to try to get this to you safely. And that is my main priority and my main goal." Sometimes exercising calm focus like that is all you need to be able to resolve a situation that can be escalating if we just tend to throw the gasoline on the fire a little bit. They made me upset, so I'm going to get upset right back at them. This guy, made me really mad, so now I'm going to hit him back. All of those kind of things really drive us away from a central message, which is safety and community on the road when we're driving out there in a very dangerous situation.
Thanks for sharing, Janice. We certainly appreciate your participation. Hey, Brandon, a lot of these drivers, it's not just the work, but it's home life, right? They bring in stresses from home. They have a lot of stuff going on their mind before they even get to the truck. As a leader, can the emotional intelligence be taught? Can you help slow your driver down? How does that work? And can you give examples of how you've done that in the past and what that looks like?
I can give you some negative examples of this, and that's where I was working with a leader that said, "I just tell them to check it at the door. Just check it at the door. That's what you got to do. You got to check it at the door." Say, have you ever asked a follow-up question about whether that was actually working or not? Because sometimes it is terribly difficult to just check it at the door. You can even say that you are, and then realize that you're not really experiencing that check it at the door kind of thing. Things are making you mad a little quicker. You're exhausted all day because you were up all night fighting, or because you've got the bills are nagging at you. You're not sure if you're in the right position or not. Sometimes drivers could even be out there and saying, "Man, I wish I'd have studied in school more. I could have been the person sitting in the office instead of the person out in minus 25 degrees in the truck right now." So when we talk about managing stress at home and at work, again, I'm going to go back to asking better questions, asking questions that get to another question. One of the things we would tell our driver trainers, and Jim, you remember this, is that if they ask a question during one of the classes, let's say it's Principles of Defensive Driving class that we offer, they might go in and they may ask a question and nobody answers. Our presenters, our coaches immediately go, "What do I do now?" And I've always said to them, ask another question, ask it differently. See if there's a different way to ask the question. Even ask them to ask the question around where you're trying to get to. But there's always a way to be able to get to that next level whenever you're talking to somebody. And don't be afraid to be honest. If you're honest with them, even about yourself and what you're doing, you will receive honesty in return. If you're not having a good day, don't show it in your actions. Tell somebody, I'm struggling with something today.
Hey,
But we're
Brandon,
going to try to get
can I
through
ask,
this.
can I make a comment?
Please do. Yes,
Sure.
jump right in.
So if you've never heard of it, there's the let them theory. And that was part of Mel Robbins' book. And that's an excellent, there's an excellent part of that works right into this. If somebody's cut you off on the road, let them. Don't let it blow you up. Let them.
Yeah, we talk about that. I love that. That's so great. What we tend to do is say that we can't really control the actions of others if we only have control over what we're doing. And if somebody is cutting me off and I let them, it's because I'm allowing people space, and I'm starting to say that's much more important for you right now to be in that space than it obviously is for me. So even allowing that to where you don't get cut off because you know that you're holding the door. In principles of defensive driving, we call it hold the door open for them. If they want to go around me, I hold the door open for them. Guess what maybe sometimes happens? It's kind of like if you walk into an Applebee's, or I shouldn't advertise, you walk into your favorite restaurant, sorry, and you hold the door open, right? And then what happens? You've got about 5 people that are going through the door. Do you slam the door on those? Because I wasn't holding the door open for you, buddy, and you slam the door. Doesn't happen, right? We hold the door open. We let them have their space. We know that we're existing in that. And guess what? You don't have to be around them for very long, do you? Because they move right along, and now we're into a different space. You can carry them with you in your mind. You can carry them along with you. If you want them to affect you, you have every bit of the ability to control whether somebody affects you or not, right? That's
Absolutely.
a great point, though. I love it. Let them.
Great call out, Roger. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the insight. So you talked a little bit about asking more questions, and and I use the term like peeling back the onion, right? You know, it's like somebody's got layers. They're coming into work, they're stressed out, they ran through the door. You know, talk through the process of how you do that as a leader. How do you come to somebody who you obviously is stressed? You can see it on their face, working through this, coming into the office. You can tell on 2 wheels. You're lighting up the tires, getting to the parking lot. They're late for work. How do you slow down their process, and how do you get to the root cause?
So there are a couple of things that I do, and I will say that it's situational, but I have to want to be there, and I have to want to be that person in that space to be able to listen. I have to be the person, and I have to know that I'm not just putting this on, but this is an honesty thing. I really want to know what's going on with them. If I really want to know what's going on with somebody, then that should come out in my body language. It should come out in, I have time for you right now. Because a lot of times that's what it'll be, is people expect that the manager is busy and they're going into their office and they're shutting the door and then they're moving to the next thing. And they may say that, hey, how you doing over there? But they don't really mean it. They're just throwing away those words. If you really want your words to carry meaning and be able to get deeply seated into the people that you're leading, then make it honestly that you want to know. You are interested in them. Hey, looks like you're having some trouble today. You want to talk about it? No, I got some things going on too. If you want to sit down and talk, I've got all the time in the world. And then pour yourself a cup of coffee and have time for it. Nothing could be more important when you're talking about leadership than establishing those connections that are meaningful, builds trust, communicates well, and know that that person now knows that they can come to you with anything that's troubling them, and you're going to have an ear for them.
I think the approachability is a big part of it. And I also think, being in a no judgment zone where they feel like you're not going to judge them when you have a conversation with them, that you're going to empathize with them and you're going to understand it. So I think is a very important part of that process. So, Brandon, we have, meetings that we set up with our teams, your ops team, the driver training team, working through these challenges. How does, consistency in meetings, how do you, as being consistent as a leader, how does that impact emotional intelligence with your team?
Well, that's a great question. Again, I'm going to go back to questions. I'm going to go back to, if you have all the things to say and they're there to listen to you, then you aren't exploring the space as well. You have to follow up your words with your actions as well. So if they see you putting on a performance, that is something that can be that can be discovered and found out right away. Genuineness in what you're doing and trying to accomplish takes a lot of planning. Actually, you can't just walk in and turn it on and suddenly it's real to everybody. It really does take the leader saying, what do we need to accomplish from this? What are the things that we know are going on? What are some of the expectations that we have from this? What do we want to learn from this meeting? Now, what do we think is most important to the people that are going to be going out and doing the work next? Because that's what I'm there for. Jim, we talk about servant leadership all the time, and a servant leader doesn't have to be just doing stuff for other people all the time, no matter what it is. But a servant leader is really about finding out, what are the most important drivers we have right now? What are the most important concepts that are going to help us as we grow as a team, as we function, as we give people these emotional tools that they can then use in their practice somewhere else? You can't yell emotional intelligence at somebody. Use emotional intelligence or I'm coming to get you. It has to be a more of a question. How do you feel when these kind of things happen? How do we talk about reaction, response? How do we talk about allowing the space to be able to exist out there with some people that really just have their own agendas? You can't affect their agenda. They're going to have it and they're going to act like it. And there is nothing you can do about that. So a lot of times it's just really opening up for the discussion and not being afraid of structuring the meeting to be a discussion, not a lecture, not being afraid of what you're going to hear. You may hear some things that you kind of don't know what to do with. But it's fine if it's honest. It's fine if it's honest and you start to make notes, you start to let your actions, speak louder than your words, and you start to let your people see that out of you, and you'll get people to start to challenge their own actions, to challenge their own ways of looking at the situation. That's what I think. Jim, you do this with our driver trainers a lot. And I think that it's something that when I see you do this, it's that your meetings have to reflect their meetings a little bit when they go out there and perform the trainings. If they're going out to do a driver training, you've always wanted your meetings to reflect a little bit the way that leadership space needs to carry over into a principles of defensive driving class. You try to, and you do a great job of this. I know I should stop talking here in a second because, guys, if you haven't seen it before, you've got to see the way that these trainers that are led by Jim Worsdale, they go out and they truly do get out there to say, we're going to have a discussion right now about how we use these things instead of just teaching all of the stuff. I've seen it. Tell us how you do that.
Yeah, no, I think first and foremost in this space, you have to be a great example, and you have to be a great example all the time. You can't be a great example 60% of the time. You got to be an example 100% of the time, and you got to be always on with your team. I think a big part of it is creating a safe space. And I think part of the servant leadership, as you were talking about, you and I talk about this all the time, is removing obstacles in their way. Whether it be a driver, whether it be a trainer, whether it be somebody on our team, unrelated to driving or training, or however that works, being able to remove that and building that safe space, having those conversations, communications. I truly believe that EQ and driver morale go hand in hand. And when you work through the process as you're building a culture in and amongst your teams, I think being able to have that emotional intelligence, that empathy for your team, getting to know your people, knowing that, hey, when they leave the office, that they're going to soccer practice because their daughter has soccer practice, having those conversations, getting to know people, for who they are, not for the job number they are. Maybe they're employee number 5045. Nobody wants to know them as employee number 5045. It's John Smith, and he works for me, and he does this, but when he leaves here, he's got a family of 4. He's got a boy and a girl, and his wife's name's Susan. And getting to know them and connecting with them is a big part of being able to use that emotional intelligence to your advantage. And I think twofold, a couple different things. When you go into a meeting, you want to include some of the operational challenges that they're having, share some of the messages. That's what's going on. Let people, like Roger said earlier, let them be a part of the conversation. Let them have and then it's amazing what comes of that. The room becomes a lot calmer. The meetings aren't as tense. People want to come to meetings. They want to contribute. They want to have those conversations and communicate. And I think that's a big part of it. But removing a lot of those layers, like the onion, like we were talking about, remove this, why this, how this, what's going on here, and being able to be consistent in this space to where it's a safe space where your team feels like they can play in the sandbox, give great feedback, give great examples of things that they're doing or things that are happening in their day-to-day, to then let it translate to their teammates as well. How great is that? You're pulling everybody up and giving them the same sort of tips and tools. And we talked about the driver trainer toolbox or the driver toolbox. What does that look like when everybody's working together and everybody's pulling the same rope? That's a big deal.
It certainly is. I know there are going to be some people on the call right now that go, yeah, except for when you walk into the safety huddle and that people are really upset right now. That you don't have an answer for their problems. You know what it is. You're going to get yelled at. You're about to take some abuse. How do you walk into that situation? And how do you say, okay, I know everybody's upset right now. I know something just happened and we have to talk about it, and somebody is going to be barking at me.
But I think that as a leader at that same point, and you and I have had conversations around this, you have to be transparent. If you don't know, you don't know. Let them know that we're trying to figure out through this, if it's a challenge on the safety end of things, and it's a policy that you're working through. If it's a policy that people don't get along with, and I'll use this because it's newer to the industry, and I know a lot of fleets are using the driver-facing cameras. When I implemented this in a previous life, the biggest thing was, oh, you're going to be watching me in the cab all day.
Right.
And it was a stressor. People did not want the driver-facing cameras when having those conversations. I literally, sat down in a team meeting, put my laptop on here, showed them what the site looked like, how this worked. It was an event-based coaching. When things came across, you take a look at things, you observe it, you do some coaching. But I think the important part in that space is whether it's safety, whether it's driver cameras, but not only do you have the coaches coaching about the bad, but you also have the good. When somebody had a near miss, I'd bring it to a safety meeting and say, hey, look at this. John Smith did a great job with this. Look at this near miss. He could have gotten to a really serious accident. He used the keys. He used principles of defensive driving. He's slowed down. He was driving on an island. He had the spatial awareness around him, and he was able to see what was ahead to be able to stop before that vehicle cut them off.
Here's something you didn't say, and I'm going to tell them the truth about this, is what Jim Worsdale did is he put the camera in his car first. He said, if we're all going to do this, I'm going to be the first one to do it. I'm going to show you how it can be used. I'm going to get into a couple of situations and show you what we're looking at here. You're going to see me making mistakes on camera, and I'm learning from everything that happens with this dash cam that's in there. I'm telling you, if you do it first, you're going to have people that go, there it is. He's showing it. This is him. He put it in his car. He's the first one to act. And leadership a lot of times is just that, right? Leadership is a lot that I'm going to do it, right?
Well, I'm going to ask a question to the group. How many people here are ex-drivers? How many people are here ex-drivers, drove, for a period of time and got into leadership or got into a fleet role? How many people on the call today are ex-drivers where they can say, hey, I have the experience. I've walked the talk. I've been a driver in this space. I've done the vehicle inspections. I know how difficult it is to operate this unit. So by show of hands, Post in the chat if you've done it or not.
So if you haven't, you can still do these things whenever you are not a driver and you rely on the driver. Great.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, great, Graham. But even if you're not a previous driver, even if you haven't really done that role before and now stepped into a management role, asking questions can be the best thing to do this. Can be the best way to help. But then if you know that something is being implemented and you know that things like cameras, it's a big conversation, right? How do we get our drivers to warm up to cameras? I'm going to do it first. You can see warts and all the way that I drive. And I'm not a professional driver, but I'll tell you what, with this camera, I will get to be closer to doing things the right way. So have a reason why you do it. This is why I do it. And this is why I think that it's going to help every one of us become better at what we do. But if you're not walking the walk, you can't really go in there and say that I want you to do it and I'm not going to be willing to do it myself. It's true, right? Very
true. And, for the other population that wasn't a previous driver, I'm in that space. I wasn't a previous driver. I learned a lot through the business. My dad was in the business for 40 years. My grandfather's grandfather was in the business for forever. I have the union contract of my great grandfather from 1934 on the wall here. So I've been in transportation for, I have 4 generations in transportation. With that being stated, with a team like this, to get respect, you have to earn respect with your team. So make sure you're using a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right here. The approachability is a big deal. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you jumping in. Roger, ex oil field driver. Oh, that's tough work. Kudos to you for being out there in the oil field. That is not easy. Not easy stuff.
We have a couple of our trainers that are previous oil drivers as well. We run into some pretty interesting stories about what they're doing out there, don't we?
Well, absolutely. It's a different world, and it's a lot more cutthroat than some of the other parts of the industry. So yeah, you have all my respect in the world for that, Roger.
What do you guys think about the idea that if you are introducing something and it's uncomfortable? So Michael, I'll kind of ask you, as a previous driver now working in driver safety, do you all have cameras in your truck, or are you looking at putting them in, or is there any kind of a push to have it? And I'll tell you, the cameras that I'm talking about are the forward and inward facing cameras. Many drivers, if not most drivers, will actually say, I don't mind if you put one in there, but don't turn that lens back on me. And what we would want to say is then they're not the fullest effect that we can be getting from them if we aren't able to help coach from these things and see what's motivating behaviors or motivating, hard braking events or swerving. You have forward facing right now. So even if your company is going to say, forget it, we're never going to do reverse facing cameras, in order to get into this conversation of using emotional intelligence, how to go into meetings where there's going to be pushback. What do you think of the idea of saying that I did it first, I'm doing it, this is how I'm getting at it, and now I'm going to ask y'all to do it? Yeah, go ahead, please jump right in.
We've got both. It's one unit, forward facing and driver facing as well. And we use that to correct driver behaviors. Mm-hmm. We only do that in our field vehicles. So our managers that have company vehicles, there's no cameras in those. And that's a double-edged sword, but at the same time, that's the company's prerogative. Mm-hmm. I fully agree with setting the example. And you certainly can't argue if you're one of those drivers and your boss, the manager, has the camera in his vehicle as well. You can't argue with him that it's unfair. But our company has made the decision not to put them in managers' vehicles, so I support that. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're at. We have seen some improvements over the last year. And we're hoping to improve more this year. Last year we were in the coaching phase. This year we're going to be in the accountability phase.
I might even just put it in my personal vehicle. You're not going to put it in my manager's car or something like that, but I'm going to show you that I'm putting a camera in because I'm asking you to do it. And so I'm going to put it in so that I know that when I'm talking to it and when I'm talking about what we can do with them, that I have a very personal experience with this thing. I have it in my kids' cars. I've got it in my wife's car. I've got it in my car. And you can buy these units a lot of times that will just link up to an app on your phone, and they're not very expensive. But if you want to draw that thing of saying, I'm going to be committing to this right along with you, and I'm going to be demonstrating that I'm doing this for a reason. It's not just that I want to see what you're going through, guys, because, I know it's going to be tough to have those in there and I'm going to put myself in the hardship. If you do something, do it on purpose, do it for a reason and say that this is the reason I'm doing it for myself. This is the reason I think it will benefit the company, and this is how we intend to use it. And I'm leading the charge that way. So, just because your company decides we're not going to put it in management vehicles, that's fine. That's their decision. It's their car. If you have it in your personal vehicle because you know that you need to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk with this thing, do it for a reason that works for you in a positive way. And that way you're able to relay that positive reason for it with your drivers.
Yeah. Now, I will say that any company that puts it in their vehicle, understand there's a double-edged sword there. If you've got it in there, you've got to make sure that you are correcting behaviors, because if you're not, somebody gets in an accident, hurts somebody or kills them, that's going to be the very first thing called in by the defense counsel.
That is so true. Yeah, we talk about that in our certified training, our certified expert training that I'm going through right now, actually up here at Keller. That's the CTRE program, and we talk a lot about cameras and a lot about how you must make sure that your training matches why you have them in there. I would use coaching over correction. If we're using them to coach our drivers, it just has a little bit different ring to it. I can coach positive behaviors that are picked up from the camera, as well as if I see a challenge that you're having there as well. And I will use all that coaching footage to be able to help the entire fleet get better.
Yeah, I just came back from an MPTC event in Florida, and it was interesting conversations. We were doing some roundtables about this specific conversation together. And some fleets, it was about 60-40 when it comes to some fleets don't like to use the forward-facing cameras for the liability end of things. If it were to be pulled into court and something were to have gone wrong, they could become liable for it. So it's a catch-22 when you're dealing with these cameras. But I do agree with Brandon's comment about coaching. I think when these events happen, if it's behavior based, it needs to be coached in the first 48 hours. If it's not coached in the first 48 hours, it's not effective. It's not an impact. You have to have these conversations and communications. Even those that are fleets that have over the road drivers. Have a conversation, have a communication, have a two-way street, have a Teams call, Zoom call, whatever you guys can do to have this conversation. And I would venture to say, and these are the tips that I tend to use: ask open-ended questions and then pause. Once you pause, sometimes people let out a lot more than they should when you're talking through a lot of this stuff. So as you're coaching them, pause for a second and let them talk. You just said let them. Here is let them again. Let them talk. So have those conversations, have those communications with them, and I think it's a big part. It'll go a long way.
Couldn't agree more. I just asked Janice if she would put a link if you all are interested in looking more into the certified transportation regulatory expert training. This is a new training that we're offering at J.J. Keller and Associate. It is a certification in regulatory expertise. We go thoroughly into the Green Book, all of the regulations there, how to apply them in your fleet. And we also talk about these concepts as well. What do you have to, if you are using cameras, what are some other things that you need to know? If you're interested in more information on that, please check out that link. Get with somebody at J.J. Keller and Associates. We'd love to tell you more about that program.
Does anybody have any questions? We're getting to the bottom of the hour. I want to make sure I answer any questions we have about emotional intelligence.
We can't thank you enough for being on the call today. It's a great topic. It's one of those that is really tough to thoroughly cover in an hour, but starting the conversation that way, are we checking ourselves? Are we doing what Janice said? Are we doing our own pre-trip inspections before we walk into a situation? Do we know how we are existing by walking the walk, talking the talk? Do we empathize with our drivers' frustrations that they're dealing with or things that are happening to them? Do we take time to listen? And thanks again for that. Do we let them? And do we hold the door open for others when we know that they are in more of a hurry than we are? How do we hold the door open for them and say, there you go, it's all your space, let them have it? We can't wait to get back with you again next month. We'll have another topic, but please send us your ideas for topics. And Jim, I'll let you take it through the plug. We love this defensive driver training program because it does speak differently to how you look at managing traffic situations. How do you manage this emotions, the role of the driver in managing these things as they go down the road?
No, you bring up a great point. I mean, Brandon is the key architect in this. You know, a lot of the conversations we had around this, much different than any other defensive driver training program out there. We are with you at your vehicle, teaching you how to operate that. And one thing we found in this space is not only is the defensive driving portion huge, but the skills, you know, being able to do some of this close quarter maneuvering, you know, building their knowledge and their skill set up and their confidence. It's a big deal when you have the drivers that are 0 to 3 years in this space, being able to build that confidence as well. But teaching those behaviors, like Brandon alluded to, the higher level conversations, talking about the behaviors and, you know, how to change that sort of thinking. That's a big part of what our trainers do. So thank you for jumping on. If you have any sort of, training need, feel free to reach out to us. We got a free training needs assessment plus a $10 off the defensive driver.
If it's $100, it's going to be 10%. So you could actually do better than $10.
This is true. This is true.
Buy more, you get more back. It's a 10% savings, right?
Yes, sir. So February topic, crisis moments, what drivers wish they knew. So that's going to be a fun one as well. We certainly thank you all for being on the call today, and thank you for all your participation. And we look forward to seeing you all in February. Thank you.
Jim, have a great one, brother, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody, for being on the call, and we love it when you're here. We'll see you again next month.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're very
Thanks,
welcome.
everybody.
Thank you.